Jorge, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
So today is a special one for me because, Jorge's brother Roberto was a good friend of mine. And when I was thinking of putting this series together, I said, okay, who can I get from the soccer world? And he came straight to mind because he's been excelling in his professional career. So we got a St. Pat's legend on the soccer scene, ex-captain with Carleton Ravens, had a stint in the U.S. as well on a scholarship, and now a director with Canada Post. So Jorge Gutierrez, man, welcome to the ARK Sports Podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here, man. Thanks.
So, I mean, what was it like just getting straight into it? And people may have seen you, on social media. They may have seen you jumping in the snow and swimming. So I was worried because there's like a snow dump outside with all these hills. So I was wondering, if you're going to do something crazy. But what was it like, growing up in Mexico? How did soccer impact your life and family life in Mexico?
Well, that's a good question, man. It's it basically changed my life. So the question is very particular, but there's a lot in there. When we came to Canada first, I was 14, and when you're 14, you're neither a boy nor a man.
Yeah,
you're in an in-between awkward stage, and if it wasn't for sports, I don't know what would have happened, because you change cultures, you come to a different country.
It's hard to make friends.
You speak a different language. People make fun of you because you speak funny. You dress different. Yeah. You comb your hair different. And when you're a teenager, those things matter, right?
Exactly.
Like you get picked on. So if it wasn't for soccer particularly, sports in general,
yeah, I
don't know how the rest of my life would have been, because with soccer, I was able to make friends immediately. It's almost like you're nobody until you kick a ball around.
Correct.
And
they
suddenly,
see how good you are.
suddenly you're somebody. And then, and then you're in a locker room with 14, 15 teammates, and suddenly you have 15 friends. And those friends then allow you to make other friends. And so the lesson there to me is sports basically gave me an opportunity where, as a vulnerable person at a vulnerable age, not knowing anything, it basically opens doors for you. So I'm tremendously grateful, even if it's just for that.
Crazy when you look back as an adult. You don't think of that things when you're a young kid, but as an adult you look back and it's a very touching story and how sports really impact our life. But let's go talking about your life in Mexico as a young kid. Which part of Mexico did you guys grow up? Talk a little about your family, how many siblings you have, and what was the reason why maybe you guys came to Canada?
Yeah, for sure. So we grew up in Mexico City. Mexico City is not the same size and population as Ottawa is. So it's a
big place.
It's something, yeah.
Yeah.
And so now that I go back, it's like, wow, I didn't even know this place was so big, right?
Yeah.
So it's a big place, and soccer there, it's fanaticism.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So everybody plays it. It's even if you don't like it, you kind of play it.
Yeah.
So growing up was nice. I mean, we had all of my dad's family was there. My dad is Mexican.
Yeah.
So we were born and raised there. I have 2 brothers that were born there as well, and then another brother that was born here in Canada. And so growing up in Mexico was interesting for sure. I mean, it's totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm consider myself very fortunate, because we were able to have that different culture and live the culture of a very, very important country in terms of culture and
for
gastronomy
sure.
and history, right? So for me, it's a big pride.
Yeah. So what was the reason, I guess, why you guys came? Did your parents get a job here, or like how was that transition coming to Canada? Do you remember it? Do you still remember that day you moved to Canada?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I do. And it's a funny question because we didn't really know why we moved to Canada when we were that age.
Okay.
And it was just one of those things where when you're a child, you get told what's going on and you question it a little bit, but you don't have the capacity or the information to really understand that. So basically we just, we trusted our parents and it was okay. So when we moved, we came with my mom
Okay.
only.
And your mom is?
My mom is Canadian.
Okay.
So it was my mom and my 2 younger brothers, and my dad stayed back.
Okay.
And so, after a couple of times, okay, well, mom, when's dad coming to join us,
Yeah.
Wow, when he finishes work, this, that, whatever, So you kind of question it a little bit, but at the same time, you just kind of trust it, right?
Yeah.
It's only after that I found out that it'd been a really hard time for my mom in Mexico, and she couldn't take it anymore.
Okay.
And so she was feeling trapped. She was almost like in a jail, because she is from a small town in Canada, and she grew up as a small town Canadian.
And then you go to Mexico City.
And you go to Mexico City, and she went there. She was very young. She went there. She was 18 years old.
Okay.
She spent 20 years in Mexico, but in Mexico, you don't have the freedom and the liberty you do here, right? You can't go outside in the streets and be comfortable with going anywhere.
Correct.
You're watching over your shoulder. You're concerned. There's the pollution. There's the corruption. There's the
looking different too.
Yeah, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
So obviously being a little bit more fair-skinned and
Yeah.
green eyes, light hair, she was obviously somebody who'd be sort of looked at, right? So, but she just had enough, and she decided she wanted to come to Canada, and I think she had the foresight to understand that Canada provided for a better future for her kids, and it took tremendous courage.
Yeah, it's an amazing story.
Absolutely, man. If anything, my mom is a hero, and to any parent that has to pick up their family,
Yeah.
and move.
Yeah, that's a tough situation. But you guys come to Canada, and you moved to Ottawa South. I'm gonna guess you moved to Ottawa South,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
remember you guys lived in Hunt Club. What was it like? You talked about dressing different. You talk about looking different and not even speaking. Did you speak English at that point, or was it just kind of broken English?
No, it was good English, because my mom, like I mentioned,
Yeah.
she's Canadian, but she was French Canadian.
Okay.
So we actually grew up speaking French
Oh, okay.
and Spanish. English was a third language,
Interesting.
and we studied English in school, but we never spoke it.
Yeah.
Right.
So the accent must have been different.
The accent's different, and
Yeah.
also the slang.
For
right?
sure.
So it was a very academic English.
Yeah.
Whereas 13, 14-year-old children at that age,
No.
they're not speaking academic English.
Yeah.
And so the slang was definitely something we had to get used to. I remember, man, being on the phone. So being on the phone with friends from school, I would understand 50% of what they said.
Yeah.
Because you can't see them speak.
For sure.
And the accent was different, obviously, but just the words were different. The
Yeah.
slang was different. And so it was hard to communicate. So when we first came to Canada, we actually lived with my grandparents for a little bit of time.
Is that in Ottawa or?
In Ottawa, yeah.
Okay.
In Ottawa South, like you mentioned, off of Laurie Greenberg.
Yeah.
And I got a funny story about that too, but anyway, we can talk about that later. But yeah, so until my mom was able to find a place for
Yeah.
herself and find a job, because she basically came and she had nothing. So we stayed with my grandparents for a little bit of time. And so, yeah, I mean, growing up in Mexico, the culture is a little bit different. So yeah, like I mentioned, we comb our hair, very properly, because
Yeah.
we came from a, old school type of family.
Yeah.
Shirts tucked in, uniform, the way it's supposed to be. And you remember how it was in
Yeah,
high
we had a
school, man?
uniform. We had a uniform at St. Pat's, but it wasn't no uniform. It
No,
was-
so we were probably the only 3 kids in school abiding by the regulations of the uniform. And, I think that attracted some attention. So
Yeah.
obviously, we'd get made fun of for that and things like that. But, man.
It's interesting you talk about slang and whatnot, because you were known as that typical midfield leader. You were I never played with you, but I played with your brother. But I remember as a junior, I would look at the senior team. We would practice at the same time. You were awesome at communicating. So it's funny you talk about that slang. So let's talk about how you really found yourself as a soccer player. Coming to Mexico, was it kind of like, an ignition that you were so ahead of everyone else, and that you talked about how, you were good at soccer, so you started to get a little bit more popular and whatnot. Talk about how you kind of just took off and you really realized that you were good at soccer and being in Canada.
I think that comes with a culture in a sport that has history. So for example, in a country where a sport is relatively young, I go back to the academic component of it, right? It's
Yeah.
almost academic. Whereas in countries like Mexico or, in some places in Europe and South America, it's part of life.
It's a religion.
It's part
there.
of the beginning.
Yeah.
So those who understand the game, who play the game, they're also thinking it and they're living it.
Yeah.
So it's not just the mechanics of making the right pass or being fast,
It's what comes after that.
but also understanding the game, right?
Yeah.
Understanding the nuances of the game. So like you said, communication. When I first came here, I was amazed that nobody said anything ever on the field. It was, I was yelling all the time.
Yeah, I remember it.
You're giving instructions. You're positioning people. Sometimes you're just confusing people.
Yeah.
But you go to these places, man, and people are yelling at each other all the time.
Correct.
And it's communication.
And you see that at the higher level you go of soccer or any sport.
Absolutely.
It's just all talking, it's all communication, holding people accountable.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was a huge component to the game here that I thought was lacking.
Yeah.
And how can you do something right if you're not communicating? I mean, soccer's a team of 11 players on the field.
Yeah.
Good luck doing everything together if you're not communicating. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, by chance, you may get away with a few things, but if you're not talking, if you're not communicating, you're not going to get anywhere. So that was, I think, one of the aspects that I think maybe was something that I felt definitely helped me in my game was that. And I mean, maybe just more than skill, because I wasn't the most skilled player. I wasn't the fastest. But I didn't like losing.
Correct.
And I hold myself accountable. So, it was, to me, it was the drive and that passion for, if you're going to do it right and work harder than anybody else. So if you speak to my colleagues or my teammates with whom I've played or people I've played against, they're probably, the first thing they'll probably say is just, he's just a nut. You know? Because I played with passion more than skill.
Yeah.
I was just, determined to doing the right thing and saying, if I'm going to win, it's because we're going to play hard.
You probably picked up a lot of yellow cards along the way.
Well, I was leading yellow card getter in university, I think, all of my career.
Which is funny, because when you think of a soccer player, or a stereotypical soccer player, someone who's a little bit weaker, or not weaker, but flops a lot. And that's not what your game was. I think you're a purist in that form, that you were strong. Even your brother, you guys were tough guys. You were hard-nosed players. There wasn't any giving 50%. It was like 110% all the time. So let's talk about, how you were in school. I know that at St. Pat's, like I mentioned, you were, a soccer star at St. Pat's. You guys went to OFSA. Club ball, where did you play club soccer?
Most of my club was split between Ottawa Internationals and Gloucester. And with a couple of years with a team that was sort of formed, that had sort of collected and sort of recruited a bunch of players, called Bytown Gunners back then. But that was my club essentially here in Ottawa. Yeah.
And how was soccer playing? Did you realize that you had a career in soccer that it can pursue after high school? Like, when did it start to click for you? At what age and what grade?
Well, I mean, things are totally different today, right?
Yeah.
Today, there's a clear path.
Yeah.
With the CPSL now, or the CPL. But back then, it was difficult. It was always a dream of mine.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps the closest in my childhood was when we were playing U16 with the Bytown Gunners.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was a team of young players, all 15, 16-year-old kids. But we were playing in the men's premier at that stage. And one of the tournaments that a couple of the teammates there were going to go to was just a little tour in France, Scotland, and England for a few tryouts. And 2 or 3 weeks before going, we were playing in the Ottawa Cup final against one of the Prem teams. And I remember dribbling into the box, about to take a shot, and somebody came in sliding, studs up. Broke my foot.
Oh wow!
So of 4 guys that went to Europe, I sat behind, so I didn't get to go on that trip. And 2 of my friends, teammates at that stage, actually stayed there for quite some time, maybe a year or 2. And so that was sort of my aspiration when this happened. I thought I had a chance.
And how old were you there?
16.
16. Okay, that's
And
tough
I
at that
was
age
devastated, man.
to get injured. That's tough.
I remember I would sleep with my cleats in bed.
Wow.
I actually would hold my cleats and sleep with them. That's how much I was, trying to invoke the gods of soccer or whatever to heal my foot and. But that led me then to understand that a professional career in sports is so volatile.
Correct.
And I don't know, I can't tell you how many kids play soccer around the world, but
It's difficult, even to play at the next level. I keep saying this in every podcast that I do. Playing university soccer it's not easy. People think, okay, I'm gonna play when I'm young, and you think that I'm just gonna go to the next level. It's very difficult to play sports after high school. It's not an easy thing.
Absolutely, and the thing is, if you don't have anything else, what happens if things don't go how you expect them to go, right?
Correct.
Then you find yourself in trouble. So that's, to me, that injury actually made me realize, and obviously with the help of my parents, who
Correct.
I think were always...
Was your mom strict when it came to school?
Oh yeah, very. My parents were very strict. And they always pushed us to pursue our dreams.
Yeah.
But they were also very realist at the same time, right? And I think very subtly, they would always sort of try to guide, oh, yeah, that's great if you want to be a professional athlete, but
keep your options open.
Yeah, don't let school slip. Make sure that you get an education. And fortunately for me, I always was very interested in school. And again, fortunately, I did well. I enjoyed school. So to me, it was natural. It was almost like hand in hand.
Yeah.
So that's something that I would really emphasize on, the importance of making sure that you're studying. If you are interested in professional sports, just keep your studies up.
So you're coming near your end of your high school career. I'm sure offers are coming in. Talk about what it was like to feel wanted about a school. And obviously, as a Canadian, it's always a dream to play in the U.S., get a scholarship. Talk about what the offers you had and what you ultimately decided.
So back then, this is over 20 years ago now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Internet was almost a novelty.
Yeah.
There was no social media.
Sometimes we had those AOL packages where you get 50 hours for free.
Yeah, things were different. So we didn't have the facilities we have today.
Correct.
So I remember, and I have to give credit to Mike Rowley, who he was a basketball coach.
Correct.
Like you've had in the podcast before.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'll make a parallel to the
no
question,
worries,
but
man.
it's an important story. In my last year of high school, there was a teacher strike, where the issue eventually became that the teachers were not able to participate in extracurricular activities.
Correct.
Because of whatever the issues were happening. So that year, my last year of high school, we had a tremendous team. And like you mentioned earlier, we went to OFSA, the Ontario Championships for soccer. And I knew we had the team to win provincials that year.
Yeah.
But we didn't have a coach. And so nobody wanted to coach. And if we didn't have a coach, we couldn't have a team.
Correct.
So I remember knowing about Mike. I didn't have him as a teacher, but I knew...
he was a player's coach, is the easiest way to put it.
Well, he was in his early career at St. Patrick's then. And those who were athletes or those who were students that understood things knew that Mike was a special person.
Yeah.
And so I approached Mike, not knowing him not knowing me. And I just basically proposed to him that I would coach the team. I would run the team if he just sat on the bench and officially allowed us to play. And he didn't even think about it. He just said, "Are you going to win?" I said, "Yeah." So he's like, "Okay, I'll do it." That was it. And that allowed us to play that season and to lose in the finals in the city championships, go to the provincial tournament. And we did a ton of tournaments in Toronto and
St. Pat's was known as a basketball school. Soccer wasn't. But after you guys came, we had a good run of soccer, and it kind of, I don't know how it went after the fact.
That was kind of the turning year, yeah. And we used to wear basketball jerseys for uniforms or volleyball shirts. We didn't even have soccer jerseys.
I remember you guys ordered some nice ones, and then we ordered some.
Eventually, my last year of high school, because of that, we sort of said, if we're going to do something right, let's go all out. And we actually ordered uniforms. We had to pay for them ourselves.
Correct. Was
because
it Celtic ones or was
it
it?
was the Celtics.
I remember
the
those.
hoops.
The
Yeah.
stripe. Those were nice ones.
Yeah, they are nice, man. Because earlier we were either using the volleyball shirts
Yeah.
or the basketball shirts, and it was ridiculous, man. How are you gonna play soccer in a volleyball or a basketball
Yeah. It just
jersey?
doesn't,
You know.
doesn't
So
work.
anyway, so everybody made fun of us,
Yeah.
and we'd just run teams out of the park, right? So that was awesome. But anyway, so because of that, I got to know Mike,
Yeah.
and when it came to sort of coming closer to application to schools and things, Mike was the actual person who said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know. You know, I'll probably go to school here or something." And he's like, "Well, why don't you pursue something in the States?"
Yeah.
And you know, my response was, "I have two younger brothers. You know, my parents are no longer together. I gotta be here for them. You know."
Yeah.
Anyway, became a personal discussion, but Mike essentially was able to guide me to understand that, you know, I could pursue what I still thought was the right path, and that if I just tried, that I'd be able to achieve it. So he actually helped me, and I remember we mailed out resumes and, you know, little player stats and
Yeah.
things like that, because again, social media didn't exist.
Exactly.
I didn't have the chance to just from my iPhone put a couple things together and just, you know, put a nice page
This
and
was
some
on
videos.
VHS.
Yeah, we had to do VHS.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we mailed out a number of letters to different schools, and I remember getting a few back. And so the main ones were Dartmouth,
Okay.
Drake University, and a couple of schools in Florida. One was Northwood University, and that was in St. Thomas in Miami. And so when I looked at the map and I saw where Drake was in Des Moines, Iowa,
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, I'm not going to
Yeah.
Iowa. You know, I came from Mexico.
We know where your decision was.
I'm now in Ottawa. I don't want to go spend winters in Des Moines, Iowa.
Yeah.
Dartmouth is in the Northeast, and it's an Ivy League school, so that would have been my first choice.
Yeah.
But that didn't work out. And so then I ended up getting two offers from St. Thomas in Miami and Northwood in West Palm Beach.
Okay. Beautiful places, I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
yeah. And so I went to visit both schools. I played a few games with them, sort of as preseason.
Yeah.
It was actually nice. With St. Thomas, we played against one of the Caribbean national teams. I forget now who it was, but I think it was Grenada or something like that.
Okay.
But that was just at another level.
Yeah. So
You know
how
that-
was that transitioning to that next level? Maybe tell us where you ended up deciding where you went and talk about that next level.
So I ended up at Northwood University
Okay.
in West Palm Beach, Florida, and it was an eye opener to me. I had played with better players. I'd played against better teams,
Yeah.
but the consistency of being overwhelmed
Yeah.
was a shocker to me. So in school here at Northwood, all of the guys were essentially either players who had come through professional ranks in the youth system,
Yeah.
or just players that were just at a different level. And the team at Northwood, I think there was probably 5 or 6 local guys, like from the US.
Yeah.
The rest were all from Brazil, Colombia, Jamaica, Norway, Denmark. It was just a team from all over the world.
Nice.
And I remember there was a couple of guys. Well, one guy who sort of became my mentor, or that I took as a mentor,
Yeah.
had played professional in Brazil, had a back the size of a fridge, and he was also a black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Nice.
Just like another level of
Exactly.
athlete, right?
It's kind of like a professional team if you think about it.
It was a professional
Yeah.
team, and I didn't start. I'd come on, play 10, 20 minutes. You know, I started a few games further down the road, but I didn't have a starting spot. So that was
Which is probably the first time in your life.
that
you
was the
never-
first time in my life.
Yeah.
First time ever. I mean, and again, I wasn't the best player in any of the teams that I played,
Correct.
but I was a crucial player.
Correct.
There was no chance that I couldn't be part of the team because of the elements that I brought. But when I was there, I was a wash. So that was amazing. And so it's, I guess, the combination of the same sort of dedication and work ethic that I had, except paired with skill and speed and size, which I wasn't the most gifted at, right? So that was definitely
So
something.
did you get those 2 years that you were there, did you get much better in soccer? Did it just open your eyes, competing on a daily basis against different people in practice? Like, did you see yourself excel? Like, do you look back and say, man, if it wasn't for that experience, maybe I wouldn't have had the career that I had at Carleton, which we'll touch on.
Probably. It's hard to say because, again, the styles were very different. And so, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah.
But I didn't just learn about the game. I learned about myself. I learned about life.
You're away from home.
I was away from home. Again, there's no cell phones back then.
Correct.
So when I had to call home, I had to go buy a phone card.
Yeah.
And you had limited times, and I was paying for these things.
Correct.
So it was difficult. We didn't have video calls.
Yeah.
So staying in touch with family was almost impossible. And so, yeah, it was a tremendous lesson. It was a good life lesson that I would go back and do every single time again. So I learned more about that experience in terms of life, and about myself, and about perseverance and resilience. I think the number one thing was just things are not going to go your way all the time, and you're not going to have everything you always wanted.
Yeah.
So figure it out, and how are you going to make sure that with what you have, that you can excel.
Good points. So now you're coming up. Maybe we can talk about how you end up at Carleton. Obviously, coming home is one thing. Was there a specific reason that kind of brought you back? I know you talked about, obviously being expensive, even though if you're getting a scholarship or whatnot, it's still expensive on a daily basis, right? You got talking about a different in currency, which is at that point in time, it was a high exchange rate, right? Like we're talking early 2000s, correct? So talk about what led you to your decision of moving to back home and going to Carleton.
Yeah. So in my second year, to start with, I was enrolled in international business. In my first semester, I met a professor who was professor of finance. And this guy was, he was actually working with Merrill Lynch. So he was obviously a part-time professor, but his full-time job was a trader with Merrill Lynch and ran some wealth management practice as well, things like that. He was just a brilliant guy. So in a chat we had one time, he basically asked me, why are you in international business? I gave him my answer. He's like, consider finance, because every single business needs knowledge about finance.
Correct.
So if your interest is working in an international field, learn finance and you can go anywhere. Whereas international business perhaps doesn't give you that same latitude. So I thought about it and I decided to change into the finance specialization. And in the second year, he ran almost like a program where the top student would get an internship to work with him at Merrill Lynch.
Oh, wow.
And I got it.
Nice. Except
because I was a Canadian student on a student visa, the Securities and Exchange Commission didn't clear me to take the job. And so I couldn't work. So when I realized this, and I tried to find any angle I could for 2 or 3 months straight, because I thought this would be an amazing opportunity. And there was no way. So I had to give that up. So when I realized that perhaps that could have been what I was facing when I graduated, I was upset. And what I think fed that as well is that when my dad came to Canada, he was a lawyer in Mexico, ran his own practice in Mexico for 30 years, and came to Canada, couldn't get a job. And I remember how much of a struggle that was for my family. So I have my mom working 2 jobs. I got my dad picking up random jobs, doing anything to help the family. And I remember how devastating that was for me.
Correct. And that's, unfortunately, it's a lot of cases for immigrants where you got a taxi driver who has a PhD from his home country. You got someone working in a restaurant. Something definitely needs to change, where there needs to be some sort of equivalency test in a proper manner, not where you got to go to school for 8 years and whatnot.
Absolutely. And that was the case, right?
Yeah.
So how do you ask a father of 3 children to go back to school 4 years right? So that and the fact that I couldn't work, sort of everything came together, and I was just like, you know what, if I want to make a proper living, I think I'm better off going back home and finishing school in Canada. And a lot of the times, the jobs don't necessarily come from what you've studied.
Correct.
They come from who you know.
Exactly.
The relationships you've built, the connections you've made. And so I realized if I'm not going to be living in the States, I need to come back and start making these connections and making these relationships.
So did you have friends on the Carleton team? Was this something that you thought of, coming back to Ottawa and playing soccer? I know that you have a tight-knit group. I don't know you guys, but from the way that you were talking about it, you guys have a good core. Did you know these guys before you joined the team?
I knew a few of them, yeah, because I had played with a couple of them on different teams in the past. This Bytown Gunners team that we were on, I had a couple of guys that were playing there. So yeah, I did know some of the players there, but we had sort of, fallen into different.
And then maybe,
paths.
sorry to cut you off, maybe set the stage. Was Carleton a soccer? Again, you're going from St. Pat's, which is a basketball school, and you're going to Carleton, which is a basketball powerhouse,
Yeah, it was
even
a
still to this
dynasty
day.
then. Yeah.
What was the Carleton soccer? How was that? How was that happening?
Yeah, it was a very good program.
Okay.
Still, so it definitely was a school that we thought, Roberto and I, my brother.
And that's a good chance to play with your brother, I guess, too.
Exactly. Well, so that's essentially what ended up bringing us together, right? So yeah, I knew some of the Carleton guys, and Carleton did have a very successful program. Didn't win national championships like the basketball team had, but they had been in nationals a couple of times, had lost in the finals a year or two before I joined.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did have a good program.
So how was that? I don't know how many years you ended up playing there, because obviously, were you able to transfer right away and play, or did you have to sit out?
I sat out a year.
Okay.
And so I played 3 years at Carleton.
And how were those 3 years? Were you guys able to, besides building the relationships and then going into your career, what were you most, looking back, what did you guys accomplish besides the brotherhood?
Yeah, well,
Which I don't want to, I'm not belittling it in any way.
The brotherhood is definitely the number one.
Correct.
And there's best men at some of the guys' weddings. There are godparents to the children. So
Yeah.
that goes beyond
Correct.
everything. But in the 3 years I was there, we went to nationals twice. Won the Ontario Championship once. Our record, we probably had 5 or 6 losses in the 3 years that we played. So it was a pretty good team. I mean, the first year, every time we went on the pitch, I knew that we were winning, no matter what. Every single game, we didn't lose that year. I think we had 2 ties, but we didn't lose a game.
And your brother is kind of like I wouldn't say a mirror of you. You guys do look alike, but he was a great communicator, a great leader. We played soccer together. We ended up losing in the finals our last year of high school, which was very difficult. We lost by 1 goal, and it was just, I still remember it to this day. But he was a great communicator, similar style as you. He was aggressive. He was someone who never gave below 100%. So how was that sharing the field with your brother?
It was amazing, man. It was tremendous. And Roberto was more skilled than I was, so that was nice, I think it was a little bit more crazy up here, but that was tremendous. I mean, it's one of those where we were almost in syntony, the whole time. Just we understood where everybody was and each other, and that was just a special moment for sure.
Nice. So right now you're a director with Canada Post. Talk about how, life after soccer, obviously playing soccer probably for the most part all your life, right? You played hours and hours and hours, and then you're coming up to graduating from Carleton, and life after soccer. How were you able to use those skill sets that you learned in soccer and made you excel as a player and you were a captain? How were you able to translate that in the professional career?
For me, I think, there's so many elements, but definitely the dedication, the understanding that in order to be good at something, you need to train.
Yeah.
You need to put the hours in, and the sacrifice. So those things become second nature.
Yeah.
When you're fixed at an objective, and when you're fixed at excelling at something, in this case, for example, sports, which has been a part of my life.
Yeah.
For all my life, the rest of the things sort of become secondary, at least for me. So that's a huge lesson that it translated into work immediately. The idea that if you want to get a good job, you got to put in the work.
Correct.
Communication, like you mentioned earlier. If you want to be able to be successful, you got to be able to express yourself properly. It's not good enough to just be skilled at something. If you can't express your thoughts, if you can't communicate, if you can't make others understand what you're saying, if you can't be influential to what you're doing, then there's no real point. So those are some very important elements. And growing up playing a sport that is a team sport also then allows you to better understand different personalities, right?
Yeah.
And understand and recognize how to get the best out of each of your teammates.
Great
So
point.
for me, you know, I was always, like I told you earlier, I can't stand losing.
Yeah.
At least in sports.
Yeah.
And so I would always try to find what is each of the individuals' strengths and how do I get those best qualities to come forward. And if that's the only job I do, then I think I've done a good job, because then everybody's playing at their best.
Correct.
Right? So if I have a surrounding member of teammates that are better than I am, then that's great, because I just need to motivate these guys and we have a winning team.
Correct.
So I think those are the main elements I would say that I was able to translate from sports. And you mentioned earlier jumping into the snow and things like that. And the only reason I bring that forward is because, you know, when somebody sees a person jumping into the snow with no clothes on.
Correct. Yeah, we forgot to mention that.
With a bathing
suit.
Yeah. You know, and when it's minus 20, the immediate reaction is, well, this guy's crazy. And maybe. But the idea, though, is that is a component that I've learned also from sports, in which you create from an uncomfortable situation a comfortable situation. And so jumping into the snow is not about jumping into the snow. It's about training your body and your mind to not feel the uncomfortable situation around you. And so if you're able to deal with that by putting yourself in those kinds of situations, then anything in life that becomes uncomfortable, you can deal with in a much easier way, because you're accustomed to it. You've trained for it. Your mind and your body are able to say, yeah, this is an uncomfortable situation, but I know how to manage it.
I didn't expect a philosophy conversation out of jumping in the snow.
But
you're a deep man.
But that's the point, though, right? I mean, it's also fun.
Correct.
But the idea behind it is learn from situations that are difficult, so that when you're in a similar situation in something else, you have an answer, or you're at least better prepared.
Correct.
And that's what sports does to you in life and in the workplace, I think.
So if we were to go back, you know, obviously now Canada is in I guess you can say, a golden year of soccer, mm-hmm. right? We're not there yet to qualify, but we're very close. We have some really good players coming from Mexico, and we touched on this a little bit off camera. What would you say the main differences in the youth systems in Mexico compared to when you were growing up in Canada? Like, I know you talked a little bit about the IQ and knowing stuff, but like, what would you say the main differences, and why you look at countries like Argentina, where they excel at so many different sports, or you look at even the US because they have a lot of money, but different countries where they're not at the same level in Canada, maybe economically, but they advanced so much further advanced in sports?
Yeah, that's a multifaceted question. So
sorry to
no, that's good. So I'll try to touch on a couple of points, and I'm going to miss a bunch, I'm sure. But finances is obviously one. You talked about it, and you said, yeah, of course, perhaps Canada is a richer country than, let's say, Mexico. But Mexico has a much richer story in soccer than Canada does.
Correct.
But the point, though, there is that your youth system needs proper financing. If you don't finance your youth teams, you're not going to get anything out of it. But in countries where, in this case, soccer, it's part of life, kids are playing it all the time, everywhere. So it's ingrained in them. It's like I said, it's second nature. So for them, it's not a sport that your parents drove you to practice because they wanted you to do an extracurricular activity. It's a sport that you wake up with a ball in your hands, and you're playing all day long in the school hallways, at recess, when you come home from school, in your living room with your brothers. That's all it is. We're constantly playing soccer. Yeah. So when that happens, and the entire world that you're accustomed to in your surrounding area does the same, that's it. It becomes your life. Yeah. So here, try to find a match of the Canadian national team who's in first place for qualifiers right now on TV. Can't find it. Yeah.
So we're starting to get more exposure now, but you're right.
A little bit. But, it's not there. So how do you expect a country to be good at something if there's no exposure
Correct.
to the society.
Yeah, so I mean, you look at guys like Alphonso Davies, who transferred to Bayern Munich. Just an incredible story from a refugee to coming to Canada. So I'm very, very passionate, and my buddy, one of my good friends, lives in Qatar right now. So he messaged me, is like, you want to give me your passport info? Maybe I'll try to get you a ticket. So fingers crossed they get in there, and I really want to experience a World Cup. I need to ask you this question because I ask all my guests this question, and I think we didn't shed enough light on your academic profile, because the way you present yourself, your current role, and even how you talked about in school and university, you're someone who really focused on academics. So I hope I didn't just brush that aside, because not only are you a good athlete, you're a smart guy too. So if you can go back in time, and it's a two-part question, if you can go back in time and give yourself advice as an athlete, your teenage self as an athlete, and then as a student, what would that advice be?
So the first one for an athlete, I would say, try out every single sport that exists, and don't be focused on just one sport. The reason I say this, and it's going to sound silly, but I discovered too late in my life fighting, martial arts, wrestling. And
did you get beat up by your roommate and the Brazilian guy?
No. Just by maturing.
Correct.
But I learned that, for example, I appreciated wrestling a lot and boxing, but I was too far ahead in my career. My last year of high school, I actually I was part of the wrestling team, and I qualified for OFSA.
Nice.
Without having ever trained in wrestling. And I realized that I would have probably been a better wrestler than I was a soccer player.
Yeah.
Just because, the bodies are made different ways. I wasn't a soccer player. My physiognomy, my body wasn't the right one for a soccer player, but I think I would have been a good wrestler.
Nice.
So the advice I would give myself as a younger athlete would be, try everything out, even if it doesn't seem like you enjoy it at the moment, or if you don't know it, but just try it. Try it out.
Because there's skill sets that you'll be able to transition to other sports.
There's a lot of transferable skills. Yeah. So just because of that is an advantage. But again, you might discover something that you like better, or you might discover something that you're better at. So, that's an opportunity cost that I didn't know of, and too late I discovered. And then I was like, well, I'm not switching now, because I didn't go to OFSA that year for wrestling because it was at the same time as our soccer OFSA.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So anyway, so that, it was one of those, like,
crazy how that happens.
Of course I'm not going to wrestling OFSA. Yeah. I'm going to soccer OFSA.
Of course.
Anyway, and advice as a student, I don't know, man. I mean, just, be patient, I guess. It's when you're young, there's so many distractions and there's so many things we want to do.
Yeah.
But, maybe just be patient and try to find the joy of studying. I mean, nurturing your brain is just as important as nurturing your body. So in Mexico, we have a saying basically that translates into in a healthy body lives a healthy mind.
Wow. Okay.
So, you have to have both. You can't be a good athlete if you don't have, a good space up in your head. So by educating yourself, by allowing yourself to learn, you will also become a better athlete. So
for sure, you become a student of the game. You're able to pick out, whatever sport it is. You got to be smart to be. You can't just be an athlete. Those athletes come and go, but to be a real a football player, soccer player, basketball player, you got to be smart, and you got to be able to read a defense, know what exactly is happening. So it's great that you mentioned that. And just out of curiosity, what was your average, I guess, in high school? Just to maybe give you some props, unless it wasn't that good.
I think I may have graduated with a 93 or 92.
There we go, man. So it's a just because you have a high average, and you can have a high average and be good at sports. You were a captain at Carleton. You had a scholarship in Florida. You were a standout in high school. So it's good to hear stories like that. And even in your professional career, you have a really, when I see you on LinkedIn and I read your title, it's something to be proud of, because, this is someone that I knew and I looked up to when I was younger. So I'm really happy that I had you as a guest. Really happy that you dropped some knowledge. You could have done this interview in English, Spanish, French. So you're very, very skilled, and hopefully we'll be able to pick on you. And when we get some of these soccer academies or soccer camps, you'll be able to join us. So
it'd be my pleasure, man. Thank
Jorge,
you.
man, it's been a pleasure. Great to see you. I haven't seen you in so long, and I'm glad you were here to make it, man. So appreciate your time. Everyone, make sure that you like, subscribe, share this. We had some really good tidbits of knowledge in this episode, so we're very excited. So Pleasure, man.
Thanks for saying my pleasure, man.